But in that moment,
Yeah.
I decided several things.
Okay.
Number one, no one would ever be able to say that I underachieved again in my life, right? I'm taking that opportunity off the table, right? Number two, I was going to be laser focused on what I wanted to do, right? All the other stuff back. But I began honing this sense of what was important to me and understanding that it was going to look different than it might look to other people.
Welcome. You are listening to Season 3 of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast, a podcast that exists to inspire legitimate and authentic leadership in the workplace and beyond. And I'm your host, Tim G. Williams. This season's theme is the intersection, sports, business, and leadership, which happen to be three of my greatest loves on earth. Now, if you don't play sports, you've never played sports, or you don't like sports, don't tune out. This podcast is for you too. I promise there will be nuggets for everyone. Hello, and welcome into another edition of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Tim G. Williams, and with me today, we have a president in the building. His name is Michael. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Michael. This is Dr. Michael J. Sorrell, the longest-serving president of Paul Quinn College, 18 years in tenure, a school that now has over 150 years of a storied history, where he has led a nationally acclaimed transformation focused on social impact and student success. Under his leadership, Paul Quinn has improved graduation rates, cut student debt, and pioneered the urban work college model. Named one of Fortune magazine's 50 greatest leaders, Dr. Sorrell holds degrees from Oberlin, Duke University, and the University of Pennsylvania. He currently serves or has served on numerous educational, philanthropic, and for-profit boards and is widely recognized as a visionary in higher education. Michael, it's so awesome to have you here in studio. Welcome to the Bonafide Leaders Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So you are my second guest to have this particular, I guess you'd call it a particular place that you found yourself in. Any guesses of what that means, you being the second guest that I've had that finds himself in this particular space? Random question.
Yeah, I can't guess it.
You are the second guest I've had that has their own Wikipedia page. So because of that, this is a very special opportunity. So I'm privileged to have you here. Look, let's talk some about sports. I think there's a good number of people who may be listening or people out there who haven't heard in detail, but they probably know a little bit about the Paul Quinn story. Yeah. We'll touch on that a little bit, but our focus today is going to be really the theme of this podcast, which is all about the intersection between sports, business, and leadership, which you've got some connection to.
I know a little something about it.
So let's go way back. Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? What was that like where you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago. Grew up south side of Chicago. And, I tell people all the time, it was such a wonderful place to be, right? I was fortunate. I know people hear stories about Chicago and things like that. Mm-hmm. My parents owned one of the most successful restaurant businesses in Chicago.
Is that right?
We sold barbecue to Black people on the south side of Chicago. And whether people realize it or not, brothers and sisters eat a lot of barbecue, all right? And it afforded me this life from what some people would look at as like a non-traditional lens, right? Because when you live in Dallas, you don't see the same type of Black community that I grew up with in Chicago. So in Chicago, living on the South Side, and Chicago's very tribal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So everybody's got their thing. So I lived on the South Side, but there was great YMCA, there were grocery stores, there were the churches. I didn't miss anything. We lived right next to the Jackson Park area in Jackson Park House. So the lake was right there. There was nothing I was missing. And when you are the child of popular entrepreneurs, you have a little bit of oomph with you, right? And so my sister and I, and I tell people this, it was crazy. I had a nanny growing up, right? Nobody else had a nanny.
No one would believe that story.
No.
South Chicago with a nanny. That's definitely different.
No, it's different, bro, right? And but it wasn't like, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air stuff, right?
Jeffrey wasn't in the building.
Jeffrey, we didn't have, like this was a very Black type of experience, right? My father never went to college. Grew up in a single parent home in New Orleans, and what's crazy is I never thought that meant anything unique. It wasn't until I got to Paul Quinn and some student was trying to be a smart aleck one day. Was like, well, your dad probably went to Harvard. And I was like, man, my dad didn't go to college. And you could have heard a pin drop, right? Because people get so invested in narratives.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like my father spoke beautifully. He wrote beautifully, right? Was brilliant. He just didn't go to school. But his intellect, like no one in my home was using incorrect grammar. There wasn't anything like that. My mom went to college, went to graduate school, grew up in a little town called Waterproof, Louisiana. Her mother went to college, went to graduate school.
Wow.
My grandfather, who I idolized, was really sort of my epitome of what a manly man was, 6 feet, 6'1", played in the Negro Leagues, went to college maybe 15 minutes, right? Like, it's hard to tell. That story's murky, right? But it was, I was raised in an environment where I had a plethora of successful relationships to watch. I had plenty of different versions of men, which turns out to be extraordinarily important. Like my father was older. He was 56 when I was born. So he wasn't the guy who was out back shooting baskets with me or playing catch with me. My mother did those things, right? And I was an athletic child, like, hyper competitive. And it's interesting to me because what I've realized about sort of my background is what a unique advantage it created, because we are a combination of the experiences we have. And it's why it's so important that our kids have access to different qualities of experience, right? So you grow up in Chicago, and then we moved to the suburbs, but I went to high school back in the city.
Okay.
So, I went to a school called St. Ignatius College Prep, which was the best school in the city. But to get there, like I took a commuter train in from the suburbs. I got up at 5:30 every morning. Caught the train, got off at Roosevelt Road train station, walked across this rickety, bridge, got on a bus, took the bus into the west side of Chicago. Now, this is not the post-Michael Jordan west side renovation part, right? This is my, highbrow schools across the street from the projects. And the further west you went, the further you went into the elements, right? So I've been on buses and seen people get hustled, right? Like I've seen, and really a funny story about growing up. So my dad, I'm not really clear all the things my dad did in his lifetime, right? But he knew a lot about things that sort of skirted the line of illegality, right? Like, so I come home and ask him about things I've seen. And you talk about a Wikipedia page, he had like a whole, so 3-car Molly, right? So I'm on a bus one day coming from school, it's my freshman year, and I see some classmates of mine get just demolished in this game. And I'm sitting there watching because, look, I only got $15 a week, so I wasn't about to gamble my money or something like that. So I go home, I was like, Dad, I saw this wild card game. It was like 3 cards. He's like, 3-card money, right? And I was like, and he said, well, let me ask you something. What did you see? And I said, well, I saw a pretty woman who, attracted the guy into the game. She played it first. And then he said, okay. And he said, then what else did you see? He said, well, and I said, well, he said, well, I want you now to think back. Did you see sort of a bigger guy kind of sitting back off to the side? And, you kind of close your eyes, your mind's eye. And I was like, I did. He said, all right, when the pretty woman stopped playing, did she ever get off the bus or did she stay on the bus? And I was like, she stayed on the bus. And he's like, did anybody ever win? I was like, the only person who won was the pretty lady. And he said, that's the hustle.
Right.
And I'm like, hey man, what you know about the hustle? Right? Like, When I had questions about the numbers game, same kind of thing. So, but seeing all of that, right? Seeing the complexities of one's personal experiences. My dad had different stages of his life. Right. When my parents got married, he ran a really popular bar in Chicago. Then they ran the restaurant business. My dad was an entrepreneur.
Barbecue. And so you got this whole vivid picture of life, Chicago and all of its flavors. You got to see quite a bit of that as a kid growing up. And in what way, I'm curious, did that shape how you see the world as a grown man?
Oh, it completely shapes. I tell people all the time, there's really not any environment you can put me in that I can't figure out. Right. And it turns out I'm comfortable in numerous spaces, and it has absolutely impacted the way I raise my son, because Mike has similar experiences, right? Like he goes to a great school here. He goes to St. Mark's, but St. Mark's is not the real world, right? Like it's just not a wonderful place. I'm not dogging anybody out, but that's not the real world. Yeah. So I pick him up after school and we go to the real world. Right? We come down to Paul Quinn. He travels with me a lot. He sees, I can't replicate helping in a barbecue restaurant, right? Like I had to sweep the storage room. I had to clean the pit, right? Which is why I don't run a barbecue restaurant now, right? Because I was like, Dad, you missed the window on that one, right? Should have answered the questions I had instead of sending me off to the depths of hell, right? But like he took me to the bank. He took me to deal with the vendors, right? Like I did. So ours is a little bit different. What I know is as a man, especially as a Black man, we have to be able to walk in all these worlds. And one of my criticisms of really affluent Black men is we have abandoned the other world. So we've left it to people who don't mean it well. And where I think we've been incredibly short-sighted, and I myself didn't fully appreciate this till I got to Paul Quinn, there are more people in that world than in our world. So by failing to invest in that world, where do we think the kids that our kids are going to play with are going to come from that look like them? Who are they going to date? Who are they going to marry? Right? Like you got to be forward thinking in this stuff. If you don't lift, that funnel gets awfully small. And, the conversations that I have with my peer friends, right? Because, everybody has angst about the choices people make in dating, all right? And, especially some of these schools, you have to understand that if you don't provide a depth of experiences, you get what you spend your time in.
Absolutely. And it becomes a really shallow experience. And what you're describing for the listener, I don't think is unique to just the affluent African-American experience. I think regardless of your demographic background, exposure is critical to enabling a worldview that is expansive and has a bit of a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And that's what I really hear you saying. And
Absolutely.
that's what you got in those formative years.
Oh, it was everything. I mean, and when my mother went back to work, she went back to run one of the social work agencies for the state. So our experiences with my mom was about compassion, right? It was about, we have an obligation to care for those who life hasn't dealt the same hand that we've had.
And she saw that every day in what she did.
She saw it every day.
Yeah,
and she was like, you cannot ever forget that, right? She was adamant about it. She, and you're young, kind of like, man, you got me over here with all these people that are old and all this, and I'm so thankful for that, right? Because what it taught me, first of all, was what it feels like to be loved by your own people, right? Like that feeling, because, old Black people, man, like they celebrate our successes differently. And it feels so good just to see someone say, I'm proud of you, young fella.
Yeah.
And And it's generational because I see it in my son's eyes. Like when, folks tell him and say, "Oh, we're so proud of the young man you're becoming." And he feels good in that moment.
Sure
right?
he does.
And but you're right. Like it's not unique to our community. The issue is, I think our community, and this is just observational, right? I think our folks, we tend to go up and out, right? And by going up and out, and we will recreate what structures we think will make us feel good, right? And convince ourselves that we're still giving back, but we're giving back to ourselves. That
That's
is
good.
very different than giving back to others.
That's really, really well said.
And
yeah.
that I think, like, I tell people poverty, we treat poverty, I treat poverty, let me personalize it, as a country that you want to immigrate from, right? And so when you think about it that way, you look at it as an immigrant experience. Now you can start to study cross-cultural phenomena with it, right? So I look at my Latino students and their families. They are so entrepreneurial, but they're not I entrepreneurial. They are we entrepreneurial.
Right.
So, one of my alums, young alum, right? Great. She works for the college, extraordinary. She and her boyfriend have already started a business, right? And the business, socks and some other things, they're help sponsoring some soccer team, right? Like I bought the socks. I know everybody's buying the socks like that, right? But like but the whole thing is to provide examples and opportunities for the nieces, the nephews, right? So in many respects, it's like the Jewish model, right? The Jews tend to think about wealth creation generationally, right? So it's not about, let me make this money so I can consume as much as possible now. It's about, how do I buy the opportunities for my future kids? Now, we cannot ignore that some of the reason why we don't think that way is because of slavery, right? So it was intentional. So all of that, I'm not knocking all of that.
Sure.
But by the same token, we have to educate ourselves. Like if you read Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro, like you can read Du Bois, you can read Booker T. Washington, like King, like Michael, whoever you want to read, there are some really similar themes, right? They may come at it differently.
Right.
And what's interesting is how start here and then as life gets on you,
there's convergence.
Right? So I think, I'm way off topic on the question. But
we're riffing a little bit. That's all right.
Like my bad. But the thing that I take away from my childhood is that it was a blessing to be raised in an environment which permitted me to be curious, right? Curious intellectually, curious athletically, curious emotionally, right? Like, and supported, right? Like people answered my questions.
Yeah, that's the two-parter.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be curious and be told, boy, stop asking them questions. It's another thing to be curious and people actually invest in trying to facilitate an answer for you. And it's a completely different outcome that you get in families where the curiosity is met with energy, positive energy to reward. And what you're describing is outstanding. All right, let's jump into maybe we'll weave sports and education together a little bit. Let's talk about sports side for a minute. You mentioned being hyper competitive. What sport did you first start playing? What did you play kind of through high school? What was your interest in sports?
So my first love was baseball.
Baseball.
Right.
Okay.
And it was created naturally. So my grandfather played in the Negro League. And I've always taken an immense amount of pride in that. But I'm also, my daughter came home. She did, I guess, the Myers-Briggs, or introvert and extrovert. I think it was Myers-Briggs, right?
Yeah, that's
it. And so she winds up smack dab in the middle.
Yep.
So, she's kind of like, Daddy, are you an extrovert? And my wife intervenes. She's like, absolutely not. She's like, your father is actually an introvert. She's like, this doesn't talk about what your person. It's like, where do you draw your energy from?
Yeah.
She's like, your father has to have time by himself, right? Like So I say that because one of the reasons why baseball was my first love is because I could do it by myself.
Interesting.
So in Chicago, in the schoolyards, and there's no parallel to this here, so you don't see it, but in every schoolyard in Chicago, in the inner city, there's a big box with an X through the box.
Okay.
Right? And kids used to sit there with a broomstick or a bat, and you would pitch, and it was strikeout. If the pitch landed in the box, it was a strike.
Got it.
My parents weren't allowing me to just sit in the random schoolyards, right? So I would go out to the house or the backyard or at the restaurant. For hours, I would pitch against the walls. Like hours. Like just in my mind, I have pitched thousands of games, right?
And are you a righty or a lefty?
Righty. Right. But I'm ambidextrous naturally, right? But my dad, I was leaning left-handed. My dad was like, can't be left-handed, you gotta be right. Right. Ironically, my son writes left-handed, shoots right-handed, right? Like it's, But so baseball, I love, because I can sit there for hours and just do it. And it turns out I'm actually really good at it. So I play it up until I get ready to go to high school. And, you grew up in Chicago, basketball is king, right? I was 6 feet at 13. I was like 6'4" by like 14, 15. And I was good. And the girls came to basketball games.
That's right.
Like nobody is standing out watching you pitch in 35-degree weather in Chicago. My mother didn't even want to come to those stuff, right? So and then I got hurt, bruised some ribs and missed freshman year baseball and probably could have made it back. And my mother was like, you might not be ready for summer basketball if you rush back. And sort of in that moment,
that's
the
when
choice
things
was sort
switched.
of
Interesting.
made.
Okay.
Now, what she was really saying is, I'm tired of driving you all over the place for these two different sports, right?
Yeah.
You need to pick one.
Yeah.
My best long-term opportunities would have been in baseball, right? I threw the ball exceptionally hard. I was mean, right? Because you have to have a little nastiness to you.
A little pre-Randy Johnson kind of thing.
My mother when she was living, she liked to tell the story how, people didn't hit me very often, right? Just every game I pitched, I struck out everyone at least one time, right? So, but we played this one team, one of the brothers caught me, right? Actually, he wound up playing pro basketball, Walter Bond, good friend of mine. And so he hit a home run off of me. I nailed his brother when he came up to bat, right? And my mother, and they're friends, right? So my mom's sitting in the stands with his mother, okay? And I didn't hit him just once. I hit his brother twice.
That's real awkward for the family.
It's an awkward family moment, right? But wonderful people, right? Then they might not even remember the story. I remember the story because I heard about it all the way home. But I loved it, right? And what hooked me on it was my older cousin played. And he made the all-star team. And I saw that. And again, I'm hyper competitive. I love my cousin, but I'm like, I'm going to be better.
Right.
Right. And that started. And then my mother put a basket up in the backyard, had that put up for me. And I went to the Y one summer. They had these little competitions and I was terrible at it. Right. Because, you don't practice. You're not going to be good at it.
Right.
I don't know why in my mind being bad at it triggered me to say to my parents, I want a basket in the backyard so I can get better. I was 6, maybe 7, and my first year playing basketball, it was bitty basketball at the Chatham Y in Chicago on the South Side. Man, the only reason I played is because everybody had to play a quarter, right? Otherwise, I never would have gotten out the bench. I scored 2 points the whole year, right? The next year, I practiced, I worked at it, gotten good, got picked for a team that was excited to have me. And this is how I learned about fit. Right? They practiced the same night as my piano lessons. Okay? Now, my son would never, ever be in a situation where piano would dictate what basketball team he was on. But my dad was working. He wasn't paying attention. So my mom was like, you can't play on that team because you had piano lessons on those days. So I had to go back to the coach. Hey, man. So I wound up on another team. Didn't work out quite as well for me, right? But playing, what that experience taught me was playing against people who are really good changes you. Even if you don't have an appreciation for what it's doing for you in that moment, even if you are struggling in that moment. Because the people that I played with all grew up to play either college football, college basketball, college baseball. Like some kids wound up to be pros, right? Like it was that. So then when we moved to the suburbs and I go out for our school team in 5th grade, and people are like, how do you know how to do all these? Like I could dribble right hand, left hand, shoot left-handed, right? Shoot right-handed. And that started really my ascent as an athlete in basketball, which, is normal for people. Positive reinforcement changes how you see yourself.
So you play basketball through that period of time. You're in the suburbs, you play, and you're now high school, and you're pretty good at this point. What are your decisions in front of you in terms of college and what you're going to do with basketball or baseball or your education? Like, where are you headed as you get ready to exit from high school?
So I gave up baseball competitively right before my freshman year.
Okay.
So at this point, and again, remember, we lived 35 miles from high school. So it wasn't going to be a whole lot of sports. Like I got up at 5:30.
Yeah.
And by the time I made varsity as a sophomore, we practiced after the freshman and sophomore, because at that point there was only one gym.
Yeah.
So I wasn't getting home till 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right. I was always tired.
Right.
And some of that was my own fault, right? Because, it was probably a better efficient use of time than I was doing every day, truth be told. But I had a really negative experience with my high school coach. My high school coach and I did not really get along.
Okay.
And it was because he saw me as a rich, spoiled kid, right? My mother was she was a very strong-willed woman, no question about that. But to him, I didn't play with enough of an edge, right? That he was like, you're immensely talented and you're not as productive as you should be. And my thing was like, coach, if you just tell me what you need me to do, I'll go do it. But you don't do that. All you do is yell at me and tell me I suck and that I'm not this and I'm not that. I get it. You've coached some other kids who are really good and they came from really difficult circumstances. So whatever motivational tool you use for them, that worked. But to me, all I hear is you hate me. And so, there's not, and literally all he would have ever had to do was say, this is what I need you to do. And I would have run through a brick wall to do it. Because once you tell me what it is, when I was younger, now I understand you just got to figure it out and set the bar high enough for yourself. But man, I went to high school at 13, right? So I didn't, some things you got to figure out along the way. So recruiters would come and he would actually not be terribly helpful. He'd tell them, I'll never forget, one recruiter came and said, you're the best forward in the city of Chicago. And my coach was like, he's the best offensive forward in the city of Chicago. Right?
Throwing salt in the game is what we call that.
Salt in the game,
Wow.
Like schools would recruit me. I never even found out. Right? So there are things that happened afterwards. And then at my senior banquet, in front of, all the kids in the program and stuff, he's like, this guy will always remember it. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Right? Should have been better, could have been better, would have been better. Right? Man, I'm 17. And that's how you frame my high school. Now, I'd had some successes, right? I'd been to the Nike camp. It wasn't as if I'm a bum, right? But in that moment, I decided several things.
Okay.
Number one, no one would ever be able to say that I underachieved again in my life, right? I'm taking that opportunity off the table, right? Number two, I was going to be laser focused on what I wanted to do, right? All the other stuff back. But I began honing this sense of what was important to me and understanding that it was going to look different than it might look to other people. The third piece of it was just that the motivation that sometimes comes from trauma.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I didn't know it as trauma in that moment, right? But that sat on my shoulder. And one could argue it still sits on my shoulder, right? And look, I loved my high school, right? I think it's the best high school in America. Would change nothing about every sacrifice I made getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go there, right? And now being on this side of it, it changes how I view basketball from the standpoint of the circumstances that I pursue for my son and the things like he's still got to have his hard moments, but I now understand the importance of having people around you that rock for you, right? That ride for you in every aspect of your life. The people you date, the places you go to school, where you work. Life is better when you are in places where people root for you. Right? like no matter how you slice it, be with people, be in places where people are excited to have you, believe in you, and invest in you.
Bonafide Leaders works with emerging leaders, established leaders, and executives. We exist to help you, your teams, and your business thrive, specializing in executive coaching, leadership development, organizational consulting, and keynote speaking services. Providing the absolute highest level of quality and service, we partner with our clients to help them grow, elevate their leadership effectiveness, navigate organizational change, culture, and leadership transitions, to advance employee engagement and retention, and raise bottom-line operations. If these are the kinds of problems you're seeking to solve and you're humble, hungry, and coachable, we might be a good fit. If that's you, reach out to me at bonafideleaders.com/contact. You know what? That was so well said. That's a model that, as I matured and gotten older, I recognize is so important because there's so much potential in all of us. And sometimes that potential is not able to sprout because we're in an environment that's not conducive for sprouting. And what you just pointed out, having been myself at many basketball banquets, I can remember my senior year at the banquet. I know exactly what that environment is. And so to hear those words come from your head coach in front of all those people, wow, first of all. Secondly, kudos to you for the way that you responded with something that could have taken you down another spiral. But instead of that, you use that as internal motivation. So at some point, you decided to go to Oberlin College. How'd you arrive to that point?
Let's be honest about how I wound up at Oberlin, right? Okay. So the coaches come to one of my games, right? And they didn't come to see me. They came to see a guy who actually wound up being my roommate, who had gone to the high school with one of the other coaches. Mm-hmm. And my team, we smacked his team, right? And, look, if you're coming to see my team play, like I'm the leading scorer, I'm the leading rebounder. At some point, you're going to notice, right? And so they notice, and he looks for my family in the crowd, right? Because, this is pre-internet, so you can't just track, I can't go to the gram and track people down, right? Like, so you got to be in the gym doing some work. So he finds my mother, and look, man, it's clear my mom is my mom, okay? She's fair-skinned. Like, my mother and my son look like almost, it's crazy how genetics work, right? But my family, we all favor each other very strongly. So he sees my mom, starts recruiting me, right? Calls the next day. And because of the experience I had with my high school coach, I decided I wanted to play for a black head coach, right? And the deal with my family was I had to go to a school that was academically on par, right? For where my mother felt that I should.
Sure, and you came from a very strong high school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's got to match.
Yeah. So my mother, level, and this is her thing. She was like, and my parents, because they had done well financially, like, recruiting visits to my house were very, very different than what probably other people had. Like, so recruiters would come in, and my dad was always at the restaurant, right? So they would come in, typically it was my mother, and my mother would sit there and she'd say, listen, before you get started, she's like, I don't care about playing time. That's up to him. I don't even care about your graduation rate because that's on his father and I. She said, what I care about is what top 10 graduate schools do your players go to, right? Coaches were like, what? And I'm sitting there like, I'm trying to get a visit, right? Like, why are you messing up my flow, Bob? Right? Like, you over here talking about egghead stuff, and I'm trying to get on, right? So she, and she didn't, because very few coaches were prepared for that.
Of course not.
Right? Like, that's not. They're like, they go to school, right? Like, so she decides she really likes Oberlin, right? And I actually really liked the coach. Pat Penn was his name. Wonderful man.
Okay.
And so I verbally commit before visiting. So I go to visit, and look, man, Oberlin is in rural Ohio. So when you drive there, you are driving through farmland. And Ohio, wonderful people, all that stuff. But I'm from Chicago.
Right.
And so we get there, and we're going in March because we can't go during the real recruiting weekend because of my sister's Sweet 16 party is that weekend. So I go on one of those weekends where there's nothing happening, right? There's no good campus parties. I'm staying with a guy who is from New England and yachts, right? Like, you know, it just, I have the non-fun. The snow is just starting to melt, so the campus doesn't even look that pretty. I was like, I can't go to school here. Right? I have goofed. And so I told my mom on the way back, I was like, yeah, I know. She's like, but you told me you were coming. I was like, I'm 17. I'm not legally binding with anything I say. They assume that I'm immature, right? So man, 2 weeks later, we were sitting at dinner, and my mom and sister and I used to have dinner together every night because my dad was at the restaurant. My mom says, so you had to talk about what you did during it, how your day was. Mom says, oh, by the way, I sent in your paperwork to Oberlin. And I'm like, but I'm not going to Oberlin. She's like, oh, you're going to Oberlin now because I paid the deposit. And I was just like, but I told you I didn't want to go. And she said, you gave them your word. I was like, I'm 17, right? And so then I started thinking about it. I was like, wait a minute. I had to sign the paperwork. She's like, oh, I forged your signature. I signed it. I was like, what? I was like, you can't do that. That's illegal. And then she trash talked me. She was like, what are you going to do? Send your mother to jail for sending you to college, right? She's like, let me know how that works out for you.
She made that decision.
No, she made the decision. So I'm sitting there, and I am incredulous at this point, right? And I was like, how could you do this? Why would? She's like, listen, college is too important to be left up to your 17-year-old mind.
Is that what you tell your son?
There's some foreshadowing, right? Like, I'm like, bro, you don't know anything right now, right? So I'm just sitting there, like, just out of my mind. And she says, look, son, she said, I love you, but I know you. If I were to allow it, you might pick a school where between playing basketball, chasing girls, pledging, partying, and studying, that's going to be your life. She's like, I don't know the order of those 5 things, but I can't have studying be last. And there's going to be a certain element of you finding your legs no matter where you go.
Right.
But you need to be in an environment where that path is a short path before you get to the business of the business. And she said, I know you may not like. I said, Mom, it's not the best fit. It's not the most comfortable fit, right? She's like, you're absolutely right. She's like, it's not. But in that discomfort, you will unlock your gifts.
Wow.
And she said, if you want to transfer, you can transfer. You just have to pick an academically, suitable place next. And so she was absolutely right. It forced me to be entrepreneurial. It forced me, because I had a choice to make. All the things that I wanted weren't there, right? Oberlin is a wonderful, wonderful school, but it's a school for people who think differently, who engage differently, who socially are a little different, right? I would say it like this. I was a highly social kid. I was a popular kid, right? So if you take a highly sociable, popular kid and put them in the place where the other types of students tended to go at that moment, then I'm the outlier, right? So now I have a choice to make. I can pout, be mad, transfer, or I can find the beauty in the place that I'm in.
Wow.
And I decided I was going to find the beauty in the place that I was in. So the things that I wanted, I didn't like the music that they played at the club. I befriended the guy who ran the club on campus and talked my way into coming in during the day to teach myself how to be a DJ. My roommate and I wound up DJing. Then we lobbied to get the best night on campus at the club. He gave us a shot, tried to set us up for failure, right? When we did the tryouts, we had like 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night for our tryout. Cool. We're popular. We get all our friends to show up at 10. Our set was from 10 to 10:30, and then everybody left, right? You can get people to do things, you can control outcomes, right? So Oberlin taught me the power, 1, of using your voice, 2, of thinking differently, 3, being entrepreneurial, but also be slow to be so judgmental, right? How dare I think, because of what my social norm happened to be, that my way was superior to anyone else's way, right? Why wouldn't you take the time to find common ground with other people? And what I discovered, there were plenty of people who, if you just slow down long enough, are amazing.
Yeah.
And so, I'm embarrassed of who I was in the initial thought process of assessing the place.
Well, you were 17.
Well, I was 17, but even at 17, I should have known. But as far as I'm concerned, right? I'm so thankful because that experience made me so much of who I am today. My ability to advocate, my ability to put myself in the shoes of others, and my ability to not judge what's right or wrong based upon what's comfortable to me, right? Or a dominant form of society. So that's all my mom, she forced me to do it. Now, when it was time for graduate school, I took my behind to do, right? I was like, I appreciate all of this, okay? But there's still some fun out here to be had, and I'm going to go have some of that fun, right?
Let me ask you about education. Did you always enjoy, and I'm going to, before maybe I finish that question, let me walk down 2 lanes. You had what I'm going to call, for lack of a better term, street education, hustle education, your dad's input, all the things that he knew, he saw, the barbecue joint entrepreneur, all that kind of stuff that you got a chance to see, Southside Chicago, neighborhoods, etc. And then you got to have a rich formal education as well. So I'm just curious, do you see it that way? First of all, first question, do you see it that way as maybe 2 lanes or intermixed? Second question is, did you enjoy school? Like, was that something that you always enjoyed, or were you not into it, but somehow you got into it later?
No, I so on the 2 forms of education, absolutely I see it that way. In part because my father told me that.
Okay.
Right? He told me in high school, he said, listen, I'm proud of how smart you are and of the schools that your brain can get you into. He said, your brain, your mother's awareness, and my money can pay for it. That's how he framed it. And he said, but there's something I need you to understand. He said, son, life is a street hustle. He said, if you understand a man's hustle, you understand the man. If you understand the man, then you can move the man. Right? If you can move men, you can do great things in this world. And he said, I want you to always understand. He's like, you're not from the street. There's none about you that's street. He said, but you better at least know the street.
Yeah.
He said, and even more than knowing the street, somebody in the street better know you. He said, because there's going to come a point in time where you're going to need people who walk from every facet of life to speak on your behalf, right? I never forgot that, right? And it shaped so much of who I am even to this day. I told my son literally that exact same lesson, right? I was like, bro, you're the light-skinned son of a college president. Come on, bro. Like, you're tall and you're thin. Like, people gonna think you soft, right? You're not soft at all, but people gonna test you, right? Because life says that somebody with your portfolio should be tested, right? So you gotta know. He's like, but you gotta know people. So, and people will watch how you move. And when you watch my son move, you know you don't want to test him, right? Like, cause I watch him at school. Like, he sees people, he daps them up, he's comfortable in physical space, right? he's getting it figured out, right? Now your question about school, what I loved was learning. I read I loved reading. My mother, she said, I will buy you as many books as you want. You go, dude, you will never, ever be told no when it's time to buy a book. And early on, all my books were sports books.
Interesting.
Like that. But that's what was interesting to me, right? I mean, I read, there were these series, I think it was called Classic, that, or Scholastic. It was Scholastic, right?
Yeah, I know Scholastic, yeah.
And they give you this little booklet, and you come with the booklet. I'd check all the books I wanted, and my mother would give me the check, and we'd get the books, right? And I just read, and then I got into reading the newspaper. And when I started reading the newspaper, I read the sports section, and I read the horoscopes. Right?
Okay.
Right?
I wasn't expecting that connection.
No, right.
I thought you were going to say the Metro.
Right? No, man. I don't even know why I like the horoscopes, right? But I can tell you what, I read those, like Omar's, right?
Okay.
Then it went from the sports section, the horoscopes, to the op-eds. All right. And to this day, I read the op-eds religiously. I love the op-eds. But interesting enough, I had really solid grades, but I didn't have spectacular grades because there were things that I just wasn't interested in. And what I wasn't interested in, I just tolerated.
It didn't get your energy.
It didn't get my energy, right? And, some of it was stuff like Latin. Okay, Latin was cool. In theory, taking Latin sounded a lot cooler than actually 3 years of Latin was, right? But I loved to write. I loved reading. I loved mythology, right? I, loved history. I studied political science.
So you had a wide range of interests. And at the end of the day, what it boils down to is that you enjoyed the process of learning.
Yeah, I loved people, right? I loved learning about people. So I was one of those people. I might have spent as much time talking to my classmates as I did reading assignments, right? Because for whatever reason at an early age, I was attracted to the idea that learning about people and people's stories was just really interesting. As I got older, I came to realize that endears you to people, right? Being interested in them and who they are and what they do and, not needing credit for things, right? I don't, even at the college, I don't need the credit. I mean, I'm very fortunate, I win lots of awards, but I'm always kind of it's my people, right? I'll tell their stories, because at the end of the day, we only can do as much as the people we lift and bring with us. And people know who the president is. I get a disproportionate amount of the blame and the credit.
That's right. You like the starting quarterback.
Yeah, it's just going to be what it is.
That's right.
I really want to know more about people, and I genuinely care about them and their lives. I want to know, how's your family, right? How those things. So learning for me was more than just reading. It was listening to the lives that other people have and understanding those. And it's one of the reasons why I love to travel. And I wander around. When we go places, my family hates driving with me because I'm one of those people, if I see an interesting sign, I'm going to exit at that sign and go look at those places. And my wife, to this day, when we were on our honeymoon, she teases me about the fact that I made her go visit the colleges in Puerto Rico. Right? She wanted to go to the beach. And literally, I'm like, well, that's cool, but let's go see some stuff, right? And we visited, I think we got to 2 colleges in Puerto Rico before she put her foot down and, was like, no, you are not turning my honeymoon into, and that's just who I am. I love visiting college campus. I love visiting schools.
Yeah.
I mean, I have visited, Tim, easily well over 100 colleges and universities.
You know what? We share that in common. Some of my vivid memories So you mentioned Duke, Duke and North Carolina, just right next to each other, but
yeah.
very different neighborhoods and surround them, right? UNC Chapel Hill, I'm talking about, and then Duke University. I couldn't believe all these beautiful Gothic buildings at Duke University, but Durham in the heart of the city, right there.
It's a different thing.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love visiting college campuses. I remember UCLA was like, wow, it's like TV. I'd never seen anything like this. Harvard, the people when I visited that campus, were just warm. I wasn't expecting that because of Ivy League, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm kind of like you. I'm a little bit of a college buff. Although I don't know that if I'm in a beach destination, I'm headed to the college.
Right. I'm back. Hawaii. I have visited the University of Hawaii. Chaminade, right? I visited Chaminade. Where else was I?
God.
Like when I'm overseas, when I'm in foreign countries,
Yeah.
I dip and go visit school. Like
Oh my
I just,
gosh.
I think about even my dissertation,
Mhm.
and my dissertation, a huge chunk of it is about the history of higher education.
Wow.
Now, you can make the argument that was that really necessary? I argued, obviously, it was because I was proposing a new form of higher education, right?
Right.
So I wanted to understand all the other forms.
Right.
But I went down the rabbit's hole. Like, I can tell you about the guilds. I can tell you, just all of it just fascinated me. And and I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know what it is about learning that excites me. But if you come to my house, like I have a lot, we're out of space in part because I have too many books, right? Like it's just books everywhere. My office is a library, literally. My mother-in-law's suite, books in my bedroom, books in the living room, but we don't have enough space for all the books, right? My daughter is a reader. My son is kind of like, yo, bro. I'll read it.
Yeah.
But
look, Michael, I want to get to two things before we end. I want to talk about your path to an HBCU. But I also, before we go there, I think if I read this someplace, connect the dots to me between your presumptive engagement with the National Basketball Association, the NBA, and wow, what would have been versus what is. Just what happened? You were somehow going to get engaged with the NBA, maybe on 2 occasions, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about that.
Here's why it's so important to pay attention to the experiences your kids are having.
Okay.
Right? I was made to feel that because I was a really good athlete, that I wasn't as smart. Right? And not by my mother, not by my father, right? But by forces outside, right? There's this sentiment that, big Black kids are intellectually wanting. And, for all those people out there that do that, like you have no idea the damage you do to people. Because even if a kid is struggling to learn something, he's still trying to learn it. How you handle that moment will have incredible repercussions and reverberate across their lifetime. So one of the reasons why ultimately I was okay with going to Oberlin was because I was kind of like, well, nobody's going to think that I'm not smart enough because why would I be here?
Exactly.
Otherwise, right? What I learned was it doesn't matter. People are going to think what they're going to think, right? So even if you're in those spaces, it's still like there is a perception earned, by the way, which we can talk about through the admissions process, that if you are an athlete, your path isn't as rigorous as it is if you're just a student. What people fail to realize is all those hours we are spending perfecting a craft, you are studying.
Correct.
So I appreciate your fidelity to academic achievement, but maybe the fact that I can do both says that maybe I got a little something different in the tank than you have, right? But I didn't have context for that. So I struggled with that and it made me make different decisions. So even when I'm at Duke, and I'm a jock, right? Like I am happiest in a gym, okay? A gym with cool books to read and I'm happy, right? What I learned at Duke from watching my friend Quinn Snyder, from watching Jay Billis, from watching the Duke athletes, is the power, from watching Grant, right? That's Grant Hill. The power that comes from embracing your sport. It's not something to run away from.
Yeah, that's good.
It's something to own because it creates unique opportunities for you. The world loves athletes. So why diminish the opening of doors for yourself simply because people who didn't have that option view it negatively?
Yeah.
So I say all that to say because I had to work through that. So even when I was in law school at Duke, people assumed, oh, you're going to be an agent. You can be an agent. And I never wanted to be an agent, right? I always loved the business. I wanted the management side of things. So I'm there, but I'm not trying to be in that. Like those guys are my friends. I play with them in the off seasons, all that. But I don't want to do that for a career. So we get to Dallas. And I work in a big law firm. Last time I got here, I was recruited by a big law firm. Wonderful people at Jenkins and Gilchrist. And I go work in the White House for President Clinton.
Right.
I come back and I work with a small boutique law firm called Luce & Williams. And it was a wonderful experience. It's really what I like to call the apprenticeship in power, right? Because it taught me how power thinks, how power moves, because we represented really powerful people who didn't wait for markets. They made markets, right? Like a very different experience. Like when you see that, it is really a wonderful experience. And so one of our clients was Ross Perot Jr. At that time, Ross Perot Jr. owned the Mavericks. Donnie Nelson and Don Nelson, Don was the coach. Donnie was his son who, was really like, I really like Donnie because Donnie thinks differently, right? And he came up with this concept because he was already thinking globally. I don't know if he gets enough credit for being the guy to usher in the global version of the NBA, right? But Donnie had this idea for something called the Global Games. So Donnie wound up being someone who the partners were like, you work with Donnie, right? So Donnie said, I got this idea. He said, but I can't run it or whatever. I was like, bet, I'll build it for you. Right. So Donnie and I built the Global Games, which was really the precursor to the Nike Hoop Summit. And Donnie had all the international relationships. I picked the American team. And then my team and I ran the event. So all of a sudden, I start getting to know all these coaches. And then because I'm picking the high school players, I get to know all the families and stuff like that. And so people started coming to me to help them pick colleges and things like that. And my deal was, I'll help you. 2 conditions. I refuse to take any money from you. And I'm going to try to convince you to go to the best academic school that recruits you. You don't have to do that, but I'm just telling you, this is how I look at things. So I start developing credibility with people because people see me as someone who's going to be honest with them and put their interests first. So I start like Chris Bosh and his family when he decides that he's going to go pro. Well, Chris played for us in the Global Games. I got to know the coaches at Georgia Tech at the time, Paul Hewitt, amazing man. So Paul is like, hey, can you just make sure that they don't run afoul of any rules in case he wants to go back to school?
Right.
Chris and his family was like, hey, can you help us not run up WrestleMania 5? And then when they decided they really were going to go, can you help us pick an agent, right? Things like that. So I wind up with all these relationships, which then led me to, when I started my own business, partnering with some guys out of Houston to represent NBA players. And I did the marketing, right? And the branding. So I create different avenues for people. And, probably the highest name brand client we had was Darren Williams, who played for the Jazz and the New Jersey Nets. And so I'm in that moment and it's amazing. And I love, I get to go to the green room, right? I've been to maybe 3 NBA drafts.
That's cool.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's a great life, right? Through a party at Jay-Z's 40/40 Club, right? For Darren and our other client, Bracy. That was fun, right?
Those guys. Bracy, Indiana, right?
Yeah. Right? So there's a segment of folks that I know really well from that period. But the thing about it is you have to become comfortable with the gray areas. right? You have to get comfortable with the fact that people aren't always going to be honest with you. You have to get comfortable with some things that, like, I'm not going to name any clients, but like, I was in clubs at 3 a.m. with my clients, and I wasn't in the club at 3 a.m. with any of the people I named, just in case people try and put those pieces together, right? So no, that's not them, right? But you, and the things you have to do to kind of help keep your folks out of trouble.
Right.
And everybody deserves that, right? But I also have the right to ask myself, is this a life I want to live?
Mm-hmm.
And am I comfortable? Because at some point I'm going to be married and I'm going to have a family. Am I comfortable saying that your family and your needs supersede my family and my needs? So we do that, then put that aside, right? Run into Brian Davis, who played at Duke, walking down the street in Georgetown, right, in D.C.
Mm.
He's like, yo, Christian and I, we're buying a soccer team, we're buying a basketball team, and we need your help, right? And, I've known Brian from Duke, like, Brian, good people, was my boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined their business, right? I become like an outside CEO of some of their stuff, some of their real estate stuff, and then try and manage their bids to buy the franchise. And it was an incredible experience. It was a heady experience, right? Because, it's not that many people who can say that they submitted a bid to David Stern in the NBA, right? Like, I still have the binders in my office at home. And so the deal that we cut was I was going to get to be president of the franchise. And then I get a call to be president of Paul Quinn. And, the chair of the board at the time is kind of like, hey, we'd like for you to be president. And I'm like, thank you, but I'm about to be president of the Memphis Grizzlies because the ownership group had already consented to sell us the team, right? So I literally in my mind, like, I had picked out a sweet condo overlooking the Mississippi River. I tell people all the time, I was in the midst of the Range Rover phase of my life, right? So he asked me, I told him no. He says, well, you can do both. And I was like, you can't do both. I can't be president of the NBA franchise and president of Paul Quinn. And I was like, and you're the bishop in the AME church. You can't just lie to people like that, right? And so he says, well, think about it. So I think about it. And I say, you know what? And I'm fascinated by it, right? Because some of my closest friends here in Dallas went to Paul Quinn. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how I got to know Paul Quinn. These are amazing people who made Dallas home for me. And I told him I'll give you 90 days because that's how long it was supposed to take for the NBA to rule on our bid, right? So I'm like, I'll be a college president for 90 days. Then we're going to be like, I thought I was about to be on, right? And the first day I walk on campus, I feel a sense of peace that I've never felt before, right? And my whole professional career, I always felt as if I was in a hurry to get someplace, right? Like that I was building blocks to get to a place. Because my career goals were, I wanted to be a cabinet secretary. I wanted to be an NBA, own the NBA team or run an NBA franchise. And then the third was to be an HBCU president. But that was only because I met Janetta Cole when I was in college, because she went to Oberlin and she was visiting campus. And I was walking through the student union coming back from basketball practice. And one of my boys was like, come have dinner with Janetta Cole. And Tim, like, this is the trifling version of me, right? The trifling version of me is like, wait a minute, I don't have to eat in the cafeteria tonight. I was like, and she's president of Spelman.
Right.
And the sisters at Spelman are fine. There is no downside to being friends with the president of Spelman when the sisters are fine. I'm going to get hooked up. That is literally the extent of the depth of my analysis of that opportunity, right? Better meal than in the cafeteria.
Right.
The fine sisters at Spelman. The irony of all ironies is that my wife is an alum of Spelman, right? Had nothing to do with Janetta Cole, but somewhere the stars were working in my favor, right? So
Probably from those horoscopes that you were reading back in it.
Right. Like, you will get hooked up, right? So, but that's the thing. Like, listen, sometimes you just have to laugh at your own ridiculousness, right? Like, I will always laugh at myself, right? And so, but at Paul Quinn, things were tough, right? It's 15 abandoned buildings. People didn't treat the school with dignity and respect. And And it was tough, right? Like it was really, really hard. But I walk on the campus, I feel peace. I don't understand that, right? I go to church, I go to Friendship West. Go to church, Pastor Haynes is like, this summer we're going to preach about callings, right? I'm like, all right, whatever. Like callings is cool. Come back to second Sunday, follow your calling, right? I'm like, it's starting to get hot in these pews, right? Next Sunday, the Lord won't allow you to fail in your calling, right? I'm like, I need my calling to be in Memphis with my Range Rover. In the condo, right? I got this whole other vision. And by like the fourth week, I realized, I was like, I'm not going to Memphis. Like this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was hard, right? Like
that's a significant mental adjustment to go to a franchise that relatively still new. Was it the?
No, it was new, but it was struggling too.
Yes.
Right?
So either way, it's a struggle. Both were going to be sort of a turnaround leadership situation.
One just had a lot more money with it.
Exactly. And so that's a mental shift, but yet you stayed true to the heart tug, the pull from the messages from Pastor Haynes.
Well, it's faith.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, look, if my mother were alive, she would tell you that I am the beneficiary of a praying mother and a praying grandmother who laid my behind on the altar every Sunday, right? They would get to that altar and they'd be like, please, Lord, watch out for him. But it's also understanding enough to be obedient, right? Like, so, I had a health scare, like 18 months into it. So I had something called sudden cardiac death and I died and had to be resuscitated, right? And when I wake up in the hospital, all my loved ones are looking down at me, which, by the way, I really don't recommend that experience, right? Because if you were laying there and everybody's looking at you, something went wrong, okay? So I'm looking up and they're trying to explain to me what happened. And I kid you not, at that moment when, she was my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, says, you had a cardiac episode, you're going to be fine. You didn't have a heart attack. There's nothing wrong with your heart. You just had some wiring, some things, which you still can't really wrap your mind around in the moment. But then I was like, we're going to win. Like, we're going to win at Paul Quinn. And, she's kind of like, what? And I was like, no, we're going to win. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, the Lord doesn't save you to humiliate you. If we weren't going to win, there was no reason. I had a 2% chance of living, right? There's no reason for me to beat overwhelming odds to the contrary if this wasn't going to work. And that is literally for 18 years. Well, I guess since that time, it's like 16 and a half years. Like I have worked every day knowing that the outcome had already been predetermined because the Lord was always working in my favor and on my behalf.
I think that's a great spot for us to wrap up what for me has been a really rich conversation.
I appreciate it.
Exploring the depths of growing up in the South Side of Chicago and the variety of experiences, the flow of education and intertwining of education and sports in your life, and ultimately a decision to go and dedicate your life really to lifting others who need a lift. I want to applaud you publicly for the work that you have been doing, your entire team. I met a number of people that work at Paul Quinn. For those who don't know about the school, just take a drive down 45.
Come on down and see us.
Come on down. It's a beautiful, beautiful area of town. The topography is lovely. You would think you're in Austin or someplace in terms of the rolling hills and 100+ acre campus. Lot going on there. But again, Michael, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's been great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this podcast, don't keep it a secret. Subscribe, leave a rating or a review, and share it with someone you know. Until next time, remember, our world is starving for bona fide leaders. Take your leadership to the next level by applying at least one thing you heard today.